So Fred, what were you doing back in 1973? In 1973, I was in high school. And I had a paper route. Mm-hmm. I was delivering my newspapers, and I was making 8mm horror movies with all my friends and my family, just like Steven Spielberg's movie Super 8. That's what I was doing. I was 16 years old in 1970. I had no idea what was going on in the UFO field. What were you doing in 1973?
I was a police officer.
Okay, where were you a police officer?
Fayette County,
Pennsylvania. Okay, all right. So that's part of your great background that gives us expertise in this area. But I've read a number of articles on 1973, and I actually wrote, there's a chapter in UFOs over Pennsylvania on 1973. Right. It's been referred to as the year of the humanoids, and the October 17th in particular as the most extraordinary day in UFO history. So let's talk about what happened across the country and then some of the cases here in Pennsylvania. But why don't you tell us what you got on 1973?
Okay, in 1973 we had a bunch of occupant reports. Then the UFO sightings. We had you had abductions, and 73 was also the big thing of UFOs and Bigfoot. Okay. This is really when it hit the fan. Especially in Fayette County. It hit Momo out in Missouri. You had the Sykesville Monster in Maryland. And I mean, everything hit at that time. And a lot of law enforcement reports at that time also. You had the Mansfield UFO helicopter incident. Mm-hmm. You had Green Shaw, I think that was down in Alabama somewhere, where he allegedly seen the alien. He chased him. It was the same thing as the Parker.
Hickson and Parker.
Yeah, abduction. It was almost exactly the same thing they seen. I mean, it was all kind of, it was just totally ungodly. I mean, everywhere you looked, there was a UFO report that year.
Yeah. Let's talk about that case with the police chief. That was in Alabama. Right,
Walkersville or something like that.
Yeah, and that was the only case that there was actually a picture taken of all of these events that took place in October '73. There was only one picture, and that was it. And people can look it up. The photograph was taken October 1973 by Jeff Greenshaw, who was the chief of police of Falkville, Alabama. Right. So what happened with that case?
They said it was a fraud, that he made it up. It was actually somebody dressed in tinfoil, and he made it up. He ended up getting divorced. They burned his house down. He got fired as police chief.
Wait, this is the police chief of the town.
Right.
And they said that somebody put aluminum foil on and tricked them.
Right.
But the residents of his own town, he's the police chief.
Right.
They burnt his house down.
Right.
They basically ran the police chief out of town.
Right.
They burned his house down. He obviously lost his job.
Right. He got fired.
That's incredible. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Portage, Ohio case with those two cops.
Right,
I mean, these are cops.
Right.
You would think that they would be believed when they say this.
When he got the report, he was actually off duty. And he jumped in his truck, he took his camera and his gun, and he said that he got there and he seen this thing, and he actually talked to it, I think, and then it took off running. And he says he couldn't keep up with it with his truck. And they said that what they feel that he hoaxed it. He had somebody dressed like that, and that's why they burned his house down in that.
Well, he's always said that that the government had sent some people down, investigators, and the investigators told him they had picked up a UFO on radar. Right. And he's never changed his story. So here's a guy who was the police chief. They ran him out of town. They burnt his house down. And you talk to him 10 years later, 20 years later, he says government investigators, probably from Blue Book, came down and spoke to him, and they confirmed to him we had it on radar and there was a UFO. So that's one of the more interesting stories. That was October 17th.
Yeah, but it could have been, again, it could have been people, I mean, back in them days, if you seen something like that, they'd have somebody come in and try to make a liar out of you.
Right.
And that could have been some of the government people there too. I mean, if he actually had the good picture of it, they would try to destroy that. And that's why,
And they did take a lot of the photos that people had taken and said we needed to examine.
Right.
And, back then you had a Polaroid, you gave it to them and you didn't have a copy.
Right,
That was the end of it.
right.
And of course, they never gave it back. But also on that same day, so this happens with the police chief.
Right.
On that same day, a 4-man crew of an Army Reserve Huey helicopter almost collided with the UFO in Mansfield, Ohio. Are you familiar with any of the details with that? Okay. They said it was kind of like a submarine-shaped, cigar-shaped craft. And the UFO, stopped dead in its tracks, and it put a green tractor beam on the helicopter. So when the UFO took off, it was pulling the helicopter up, and the 4-man crew was saying like we were almost like going weightless because it just took them and dragged them up with them as it took off. And then it kind of released, their controls came back. They had lost control. Electrical control. Everything turned back on and it released them. It didn't just drop them into a dead fall. But that happens the same day as the case with the police chief. And, that's confirmation that something else is going on that day.
That was actually, I would say, two of the most famous cases of the year, the Mansfield case and the police chief case.
Yeah. And then, it's funny when you look at this, Fred, it kind of, if you can picture here's a picture of that's just Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you take a picture of the United States. It started down in that Alabama, Mississippi area.
Right.
It came up the Mississippi River. Then it came across like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then it went up the coast and it ended in New Hampshire on November 2nd. So you had about a 5-week, it was 5 weeks, a 5-week period, 4-week period. It came up the Mississippi, across Pennsylvania, and up to New Hampshire, and that was the end of it. So what about, there was probably a case that people would say was the most famous case of it, was the one in Pascagoula, Mississippi, with Parkson and Hickson.
But like I say, the picture of the police chief took and the picture that the way they described the alien that they seen, almost the same.
Yeah.
Almost the same.
Yeah. I was saying before, I have a little model of the creature. I wish I would have brought it last night. I was saying bring it and show it. I have that at home and I forgot to bring it. But how about the Pascagoula, Mississippi case? That one. Do you want to tell us a little bit of what happened with that?
They were allegedly Parker and Hickson. They were fishing. And this is one of them cases where if you say you're abducted to the police, and they look at you and they laugh. But there's 2 cases where the police actually come and got the people and it gave them a polygraph test and the whole 9 yards. That was Travis in this case.
Yeah.
But they were fishing and they said they seen a light out there, and then all of a sudden it came in. They seen the aliens get out and they were brought aboard a ship. They don't really say what happened aboard the ship. But
they don't remember though.
Yeah,
it was kind of like the memories were blocked on the ship.
Then they came out and they didn't want to talk about it. They both were sitting there looking at each other like, should we say something? And then finally they made a phone call down to the police department and they came up, the sheriff came up and talked to them, and then he believed them. And that's how the case got started. They gave him a polygraph test and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, only one took the polygraph. The other guy, they say, well, some articles you read say he refused the polygraph. That wasn't really the case. He suffered a nervous breakdown.
Right.
That's what happened. The
That
guy
was a young kid.
The younger guy.
Yeah.
He was in the hospital. He actually suffered a nervous breakdown. It was similar again to the Portage cops.
Right.
The one cop basically had the same thing. He lost his marriage, lost his job, suffered a breakdown. And some of the things, the descriptions that they made was that they saw this flashing blue lights, and it was a cigar shaped, so it was kind of longer, like the other one. The police chief says it's it looked like a submarine, but cigar shaped is what we call it. So now these people, this is actually a week before the police chief that we talked about. So they see this thing. It's about 40 feet across and it's 8 to 10 feet high. So obviously you could have occupants walking in and out of it. And it was hovering about 2 feet off the ground. It never did touch ground. And they said there was some sort of, when what came out of it were these creatures that had claws, like 3 fingers with claws, and they were wrapped in some sort of, they looked like a mummy is what they were saying.
Right.
They were mummy wrapped, and they had these things on the side of their helmet. I wish I would have brought that little doll with me, but and they said they took them on the ship, and they had this mechanical eye that was shaped like a football.
Right.
A mechanical eye that kind of scanned their bodies, but they were told, I guess when they were released, that we mean you no harm.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so I don't know if, it's not like they startled these creatures, because the UFO approached them. It wasn't the other way around, So so that was a case that a lot of people will remember. And as a matter of fact, they had said the Pascagoula, Mississippi case was one of the better cases. But if you remember what they had done when the police got involved, they took the 2 witnesses, Parkson and Hickson, and they put them they interrogated them, then they left them in the room, and they left the cameras going.
Right, and watching them.
Yeah, because they figured that once they were out of the room, and this happens with a lot of criminals, you're sitting there talking and saying, oh, we got to remember to say this, so they bought that. You think they believe it? None of that happened.
No, they stood there, and it was like, man, I'm scared. I mean,
well, the one, like I said, he ends up with a nervous breakdown. So the cops, and that's at the point then that the police then say, you know what, these guys are telling the truth. And that's when they ordered, I think it was blood tests and polygraph.
But then again, John, you look at the police, it's like I said, I was a cop. I mean, in the beginning, I never believed none of this stuff either. And then once you start seeing it, I mean, like I said, I never seen a Bigfoot, I never seen a UFO, I mean, that I know from outer space. I've seen things I can't explain. But you start looking at it, you start saying, well, maybe something is there. But I think the thing is, a lot of people, how many other cases occurred in 1973 that we don't even know nothing about?
Yeah.
Because people were afraid to say anything.
Yeah, well, there was a huge wave. Let me, I got a picture of the, let me put it up here. Maybe we can get it on the camera. Let's see, that's a picture of the creatures right there, what it had looked like from that case. But there was a lot of other cases that took place. A week later or so was the case in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, right? Do you want to tell us about what happened with?
Well, what happened there? There was two guys was riding. The guy, what was a farm, okay, and there was the son of the owner of the farm and another guy was riding in a truck, and they seen a light in the sky, and they seen it come down and land on the farm down over the hill. So they went down there, and as they got down there, they observed they observed a craft, a circular craft sitting there. It was glowing white. They seen 2 Bigfoot running along the fence line. And the son took the gun out and actually fired a couple caps at the Bigfoot. When he did, the Bigfoot put his hand up and a UFO just vanished. And they left. I don't think he hit him. But they left, and then they came back, and the state police were there, and investigators were there from UFO investigators. And I guess the guy, then he started talking, he started acting like an animal.
Well,
he was going crazy. I mean, and then there was a state police came there. I don't think they took any tracks or anything.
Yeah, they said, though, that the area where the UFO was glowing.
You could read a newspaper.
And this is what the state troopers said. The ground and the grass was glowing.
Right.
So, and then I think it was the next day that some investigators showed up, and one of them went inside this area, and that's when he got delirious, fell to the ground, started howling. They had to actually go in and pull him out of the circle.
It wasn't an investigator, it was one of the people.
One of the witnesses.
One of the witnesses.
Yeah, he was with the investigators, and they went into that area. So,
well, they brought psychiatrists into this case and everything, and they said that they seen what they seen. I mean.
Yeah. I had in my book, there's a reporter in Bucks County, Jerry Jonas, and he wrote a chapter in the book. He also spoke at our Philadelphia UFO conference, but he actually wrote some articles that appeared in the Bucks Courier Times back in '73, and one was where they were at a drive-in theater. This is in Bucks County, PA, and people were at the theater, and they all saw this UFO, and this one girl and I guess her boyfriend in particular were the ones that Jerry Jonas had interviewed. But it was a really good case, and he He then interviewed some other people that came forward after he wrote his article, and I know he has an extensive file on one case in particular that the woman claimed she was abducted. Right. And you know, in that case, he really delved into it, and he's written some like 3-part articles for the newspaper there in Bucks County about this case. But there were so many cases back in '73.
I think there was a lot of people abducted back then, but like I say, nobody wanted to say anything. I mean, you'd still be mockery made of. I mean, it's like me being a police officer. Hey, Fred, what are you doing at midnight? You know, come up here. We had a UFO report. We want you to investigate it.
Yeah, they don't take it too serious.
They don't take it serious. I mean,
yeah.
But then you had one guy that said, and this is interesting too. Someone once told me that the UFO invasion occurred because we were messing around on the moon. It is curious that we never went back to the moon after this, and to this day, Russia still has not been there either.
Yeah, well,
so could that have been part of it too? I mean,
and another observation that was made was that this wave started and ended when President Nixon put our nuclear forces on DEFCON 3 because of what was going on in the Middle East and with the Soviet Union. When he went to DEFCON 3, the wave started. He took us off DEFCON 3 October 31st and November 2nd, it ended. So I don't know if the fact that we may have gone nuclear, that attracted them. Maybe they maybe thought we were going to blow each other up, and they came in to get samples, soil samples, DNA samples, because they thought that was going to be it. You know, they obviously were monitoring everything.
Well, we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk. Yeah, another episode is on nuclear bases and all of that.
But like I say, you had quite a bit of sightings. This I have a cast here that was made in Sykesville, Maryland. Which is interesting. It's a 4-toed. Most Bigfoot have 5 toes, but you have 4 toes and 3 toes. This was made in Sykesville. A UFO was seen, and then the creature was seen, and this is the cast that they made from it. They made quite a bit of, like I said, there was quite a bit of UFO and Bigfoot reports in them days.
Well, that year, like you said, that was the first time really that you were getting Bigfoot and UFOs.
Reports,
right? In the same reports. There was all kinds of different humanoid-looking creatures, and people would describe them as, sometimes they'd have a yellow jumpsuit on, sometimes silver, and there were a number of different descriptions of these creatures back then. But let me give you a quick timeline that I had put in my book. Okay. Did you have something else you wanted to cover?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. This was really a timeline of what happened in October '73. October 1st in Tennessee, 3 teens see an egg-shaped UFO and some sort of a hairy creature, and this one left imprints, so that could have been that one right there. Then October 4th, Simi Valley, California. There's a triangular craft, this time again, humanoid creatures spotted. October 6th, Quebec, Canada. A dome-shaped craft with 5 creatures that were wearing yellow type outfits. October 11th, Mississippi. That's the Pascagoula case that we just talked about with three creatures involved. October 16th, Burbank, California. These beings from a craft tried to coax a teenager to come on board. They wanted to take the person rather than just grab them. They were trying to coax them to come on board. October 17th in Lehigh, Utah, this woman by the name of Pat Roach, she had 4 kids, and she claims that they were all abducted. Her and the children had been abducted. In October 7th, now this is the date, 17th, is the date that they say the most cases. October 17th in Berea, Tennessee, there's a UFO seen in the woods, and there's trace evidence of a landing in the woods. Again on the 17th, you've got the case with the police chief in Falkland, Alabama, Jeff Greenshaw, and he takes the only photo of it, and he gets this creature, with claws and 3 fingers wearing a silver type metallic suit. Again on the 17th, Dansville, Georgia. So this all seems to be down in the deep south there, at least on that day where this had started. Dansville, Georgia, Paul Brown fires his pistol at two beings near a cone-shaped craft. Again in Georgia, Luxley, Georgia, Clarence Peterson and his truck are elevated and taken into the UFO. It actually took the truck into the craft. The following day, on the 18th, Savannah, Georgia, small beings are spotted by the side of the highway, and Susan Ramstead is abducted. Her car stalls, and she's abducted and taken on the craft. The 19th, now this is a day later, right. In Ashburn, Georgia, the woman's car stalls and small creatures approach her car.
Well, you know, you got the Mansfield case on the 18th.
Yeah, let me finish the
18th,
let me finish the, is that, okay. And then on the 19th, you had Copeland, North Carolina, a blue oval craft with the humanoid in it wearing a gold-colored outfit seen. October 20th, college student Lee Proctor is abducted for 4 days. On the 21st, Cloverfield, Ohio. So now it's moved up the Mississippi, and it's in Ohio. Right. You have these gray humanoids and a craft scene and trace evidence found. 22nd, Indiana. Small creatures in silver outfits are seen by 4 witnesses in 3 separate incidents. Then on the 25th, I guess at this point the media and everybody's there asking the FBI what's going on. FBI Director Clarence Kelly denies the agency's involvement in any UFO investigations. Yet you've got this huge wave of UFOs going on, and well, they at least deny that they're involved in investigating them, you know. And then the 25th, on that same day, was the Uniontown case that you just spoke about. The 31st, we remove our nuclear weapons from DEFCON 3. And then the wave ends with 3 reports in Gulfstown, New Hampshire on first couple of days in November, where these creatures were seen taking soil samples. And one woman was chased from her car and actually managed to run to a neighbor's house and get to safety. So that was, you know, October was a strange month.
What did you say about the Lehigh, Utah case?
Oh, that happened right in the...
Yeah, that was 16, 17, but what did you say? I mean,
that's in here somewhere, Fred. I don't know. I don't want to go back and start searching for it on that.
Well, I got it here. It says a woman was abducted from her home, as well as possibly 3 of her children and a neighbor boy.
Okay.
And given a medical examination on board the craft. Carrying a machine of some sort, 3 beings lifted the woman from a couch and carried her by her arms. Her next memory was a big bright room with lots of lights and buttons and glass tubes containing liquid. She observed 4 or 5 of the humanoids on the craft and at least 2 human beings. So you had 2 human beings there.
They had 2 others on the craft.
Right.
Well,
all right. And they said they did not communicate with her. They were coldly efficient and made her feel like a guinea pig. They were 4 to 5 feet tall with head coverings and helmets, no nose, long fish-like mouths, orange hands, gloves, and 2 or 3 big claws. Again, they had claws.
Yeah, it was their claws. Yeah.
I mean, almost every humanoid you've seen during that period had claws.
Yeah, this time period really departed from the norm because there were dozens of landing reports, occupant sightings, abductions, but they seemed to be here harvesting soil samples and human DNA samples. And most of these cases took place in really remote areas. It was also the first time that people reported seeing female crew members. And it really looked like it was a single species of ET that was here. They had a specific time frame to get in, take all their samples of soil samples and human samples, and they had to get out. They had a scientific purpose for why they were here. They had a very short window to operate. They were in and out in about 5 weeks. So, Fred, that's our episode this time on 1973. But that October of '73 goes down in history as one of the most prominent days in UFO history. Thanks, Fred. We're out of time today. So that's our show for this week. Visit www.mufonpa.com for more information. I'm John Ventry, and thanks for watching.